Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I always like being the last speaker because in a panel, because whatever I wanted to say has already been covered by my distinguished colleagues, so I can keep my intervention short, especially taking into account the time, and we would like to have a dialogue with you. First of all, I would like to thank Terry for organizing this outstanding summit, and we are delighted to be co-partner associates, we meaning the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Terry has mobilized so many distinguished speakers and panelists, and we're delighted to be part of this. Just a word on IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development. We are a United Nations specialized agency and an international financial institution. We work in more than 100 countries globally, and basically we provide concessional loans and grants for smallholder agriculture and rural development. You heard from my colleagues about the importance of family farming, so I don't want to really repeat that, but I do want to highlight two things only. And that is, as you heard from my colleagues, that more than 70% of the food that we consume in the world is produced by family farmers. So they become very, very important to ensuring global food security, national food security, and for meeting the SDGs. But at the same time, the family farmers are, by and large, the poorest segments of our communities in rural areas. So it is our moral obligation also to ensure their better livelihoods, incomes, and overall well-being. So that is why the decade of family farming becomes very important. So let me come to the decade for a second and brief you on what IFAD and FAO are doing together, because as you know, the UN General Assembly that was adopted in December 2017 requested both FAO and IFAD, both based in Rome, to implement the decade for family farming from 2019 to 2028. So we are working very actively with other partners, with member states, including India, and farmers' organizations and women's representatives to develop an action plan for the decade, which will include different types of actions, complementary actions at the global level, at the regional level, at the country level, policy actions, actions to implement programs and projects at the country level, policies to transform policies, favorable policies for family farming at the country level. So we're developing this action plan, which will be adopted ultimately in an international conference that both IFAD and FAO are jointly organizing in Rome at the end of May in 2019. So that will really represent the launch of the decade, when we will collectively undertake all these actions in support of family farming. I would like to conclude by making two observations. And these points have also been made by my colleagues previously. The first one is the fundamental importance of partnerships. And I don't want to repeat what was said earlier. And I would like to only single out partnerships with the private sector. Because as a global organization, what we're seeing is that we do have partnerships as a development community. We do have partnerships with the private sector. But partnerships with the private sector, especially in remote rural areas where family farmers live, is rather infrequent. So we really need to make further efforts to see how we can mobilize the partnership with the private sector, not only so that they can provide greater investments in rural development and in family farming, but also that we can leverage on their expertise, on their innovation and their technologies. And my final point to conclude is that when we speak about family farming and promoting family farming for meeting the SDGs, I think we have to contextualize it within the broader framework of ensuring sustainable and inclusive rural transformation, rural development, so that we're not only talking about on-farm activities, but we're talking about the entirety of development and economic transformation in the rural space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Muthoo.
Because we're lucky enough to have some ministerial speakers coming later, if we could just have 5 minutes worth of questions, so maybe two quick questions would be grand.
Fair enough. Any questions? Yes?
I am R.K. Khanna formerly with the Central Water Commission, Government of India, looking after environmental issues and also command area development related to agriculture. One important issue which has not been touched here is the role of women in agriculture, gender issues. I think that's very important, especially in India and this part of the world. I would say the SAARC countries, women do the maximum work with the agriculture, right from the morning, and throughout the day they work on the farms with the husbands, and many of the, because of male migration, they are heading the households and doing all the work. But when it comes to decision making, the husband is the member of the farmers association or the water user association, because the land and property are in his name. So when it comes to decision making, they are pushed to the background. I've got some papers on this also, and I think that is unfortunate, and any panelist can respond to it.
Yes. Dr. Abdul?
Oh, no, my question is
Well, I did mention
Okay,
about,
fair.
sorry, here.
It's better to,
he talked about the migration.
Women.
would you like to take this? or-
I can briefly comment on that.
Yeah,
I think
please.
I think everyone in this room and beyond will agree with what you said about the role of women in family farming, but generally in sustainable and inclusive rural development, agriculture and rural development. Let me just mention and link that to the decade of family farming. What I didn't mention to you earlier on is that we have constituted an international steering committee to support Ifad and FAO to accompany the implementation of the decade. And in that context, we also have farmers' organizations, in particular women's organizations, represented in that international steering committee, so that we can hear their voices also as we move forward in formulating the action plan and delivering on that. And I would like to share with you, as a concrete example, before coming this afternoon to the auditorium here, I had a meeting with representatives of SEVA. I think many of you know SEVA, Self-Employed Women's Association, precisely to see how we can engage them in the process of the decade of family farming.
Thank you. Any question? Yeah, please.
Yes, I'm Vishwajit with Asia Consulting Group. My question is for the whole panel. It's about the biggest trend of this century, which is urbanization, and the entire movement of youth and of male workers to the cities, and basically the fracturing of the family farm unit, so to speak. And I wonder if the panelists can comment on government policies that try to push the economic center of gravity back towards the villages and push the opportunities back to the villages, so that the urbanization, which is again at breakpoint for cities, can be avoided.
I think the skill development initiative of Government of India can take a central role in terms of developing skills which are relevant for agriculture and agribusiness. That would create lots of opportunities to youths for not only having income generation or higher income, but also maintain higher social status. And that's what is actually, we have seen that the migration is happening particularly in the youths for education, and then they remain in the cities because they don't see big opportunities back into their villages.
Yes, just
One more, or you would like?
no, just to share a little bit of experience that we have. I mean, I think it's a question of the onus is on the farm to be attractive for a career for the young people, and that means, you know, modernization. It means using some of the technologies available to us, like digital technologies, business planning, making farming more business-like will start to appear more attractive. It's clearly necessary, and so these are some of the tools we can use to encourage it. So.
There was one more, two more. Can we take two more? One more.
Just 2 minutes of one question and brisk answers, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any? Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned about collaboration or cooperation between small farmers and corporates. The problem here, it seems to me, is that the farmers are small and numerous, the corporates are large and few in number. And this makes for a perfect storm of an unequal relationship. Specifically, the corporates are monopoly suppliers of inputs, they're monopoly buyers of the output, and this can lead to very perverse outcomes for the farmer. And this is not theoretical, because we've seen this in all the banana republics like companies like Del Monte and so on. So what is your prescription for avoiding these kinds of perverse outcomes in the kind of collaboration that you advocated?
Okay, to keep it very short, I would just like to clarify, I never used the word corporates, I said private sector. So it could also be small and medium enterprises in rural areas, and that's the angle we come in from Ifad. We do realize and recognize what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. And in that context, I would like to also highlight that Ifad is just now launching a new instrument, a complementary instrument to its traditional instruments of providing loans and grants to governments, whereby we will be able to directly invest in private sector, in small and medium enterprise development in rural areas. So that is the focus that we are taking. We will be able to provide equity funding to startup businesses, of farmers' organizations, women's organizations, young entrepreneurs who want to contribute to rural development, for example, in terms of developing agro-processing, in terms of marketing chains, and so on. So it is true what you're saying. It's very difficult and challenging and risky also to partner with the large private sector. But we should not rule that out either, because if we can make investing in rural areas attractive, and if we can also build the capacity of our farmers, as my colleagues were saying earlier, in terms of skills and knowledge to engage with larger investors, that is something that we should also explore and not rule out.
Thank you. Last question.
This is rather more of a comment to Mr. Muthoo, who is going to implement it as a part with the FAO. You know, we should really speaking build on, when we talk of the farming family systems, on the local knowledge and local biological resources available right there. Particularly, as was mentioned by our panel from Japan, the panelists from Japan, that there's a lot of local biodiversity which is already in place, and which is very important, particularly when we talk with regard to climate change or climate resilience and nutritional quality improvement. You know, particularly based on the information and the knowledge which they have. And that's what the farming system says, family farming decade says, building on the local knowledge and act at the global level. So particularly when we talk not only of India, which is the richest agro-biodiversity center we have in the world, even Asia for that matter, you know, these local farmers, we have done some analysis and research on mainstreaming agro-biodiversity, particularly to take care of climate resilience and nutrient security, will be much more important. You know, not only the crop breeds, the one which are being bred by the corporates or by the private sector, most high-yielding, you know, kind of hybrids and varieties. Rather, we come back to some of these land races, you know, farmers' varieties, obsolete varieties, which is kind of an input for the organic farming more available. With less resources, you put more. But the only question would be, how can you help them in marketing those nutritional products better at a kind of a premium price to increase their profitability. So I think if these things, you know, we have plenty of this information available, and in fact, particularly Himalayan or other states in India to take care of this particular part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the end. Okay. I would like to thank all the distinguished panelists as well as this very learned audience. Thank you very much for a nice and lovely session.
Thanks very much indeed. And sorry to have to bring it to a close. It was a really interesting session. We have the results of the last poll, the final polling boxes from the remote constituencies up in the auditorium in the balcony have come through. So there we have it. The vast majority of you believe that government, national policies are essential in terms of curbing plastic in marine waters.